They burned cars, and when they burn a car, it also can burn the front of a building, and the people are in the building. They did $1 million worth of damage in the Sorbonne. They destroyed the Graduate School of Sociology, and they're mixing up with people from the extreme left and anarchists and communists and so on.
The term itself means smashers, right?
Well, a casse is break, so some people call them breakers, but I call them smashers because that's what they do. They smash cars, they smash shop windows, sometimes they smash people.
You've been published in many different papers, very prestigious papers, including the Wall Street Journal, but they won't pick you up in Le Monde, the main paper.
Right, and I am recognized as a writer in French. It's not that I don't know how to write in French.
Yes. But they won't publish you there, will they?
Oh, no. There are writers who are well-known, who were well-known already, and who used to be published in Le Monde, such as Daniel Sibony, a very brilliant writer. Yes. And after 2000, they couldn't get published in Le Monde anymore.
Wow.
Le Monde published a beautiful text by Judea Pearl, the father of Daniel Pearl,
yes,
a eulogy for Ilan Halimi. And they took out some very important parts of it. They did a very mediocre translation. They published it. And there were readers' comments. I saw it, there were about 30 comments, and about 27 of them were hostile, insulting, and throwing out the same kind of libel against Israel's, slander of Israel, and saying that to the father of Daniel Pearl.
Okay.
To explain why somebody should kill Ilan Halimi in France.
You and I have something in common, a passion to bring truth to the dialogue, to correct things that are just wrong in the news. What's wrong with the news in France?
It took me time to realize that the press is not free in France. It's not free and it's not diverse. But it is not a real, a communist situation where but you have state-owned media. You have interference from the government all over the place in the media. And you have private media that belong to companies that depend on the state for their business. So you have a sort of company town atmosphere where a journalist who rocks the boat one place cannot get hired anyplace else. So you have the Al-Dura affair, where...
did you say the Al-Dura affair?
Al-Dura affair, yes. September 30th, 2000, French journalist and Palestinian stringer identified as a French cameraman happened to be there when a Palestinian child is killed by Israeli soldiers in front of everyone's eyes. This just went over in one flash, emotional flash of blood libel. Since then, countless people have investigated. There is no doubt that it's a fake. My article and commentary develops one argument based partly on my own thinking, partly on the other people who are too numerous to mention, but I'm grateful to them. And this film is all in all 1 minute. And yet people talk of an event that happened in 45 minutes. There is no other film of Mohammed Al-Dura and his father. Nothing happens in the 1 minute. You can look at it again and see. Nothing happens. And yet they've invented a whole story about it.
Certain events in history really galvanize a civilization, a country, like in Dreyfus was one of them. We learned it in grade school. This is also another one, isn't it?
Yes, and this is
affair.
Blood libel, and it functions as blood libel in an international scale with all of the terrible results of blood libel. To this day, people are beating up Jews, killing Jews, and saying it's because of what they did to Mohammed Al-Dura. In the United States, they've almost forgotten. In France, most journalists know it's a fake, and none of them will speak out. And when someone speaks out, there's Philippe Carcenti, who has a website called Media Ratings, which is a media watch. Instead of developing like Camera, he's getting lawsuits all over the place. And I don't know how in the world they could go to court. If they go to court and win on the Al-Dura affair, then it's really a very serious situation because they could not win on the evidence.
Is the trial upcoming?
I think it's next fall.
That should be a very historic, important trial.
Yes. So the damage has been done, and nobody will undo it. And people don't realize, because it's, you know, you do that, you know, it's a one-shot thing, it's very strong, and afterwards everything flows from it, and people don't realize how important it was, that one-shot thing. So when you try to correct it, they say, oh yes, you know, that was a long time ago. People can see the films on a site called seconddraft.org, and they can see the films.
You once took your grandson to a peace rally in Paris,
Yes.
and you did that for a certain reason.
Yes, in the spring of 2003, when the winter and spring of 2003, the anti-war movement in France was just enormous. And of course, the children, they're influenced by what they hear in school. And so one of my grandsons, with whom I have very fine intellectual conversation, I took him to see a peace march. And at first it was very pretty and, you know, sort of dovish people. And then came all of these crazy, fierce people, keffiyeh people, jihad wrapped in their heads. And he sees an American flag. The blue part with the stars is replaced with Israeli flag, and there's a swastika on it. And he said, what? I didn't know about that. And he said, should I tell my friends at school about this? You
Why
know
was
how
he,
young people
Why was
are.
he concerned? Was he afraid to tell his
Well,
friends?
well, it seemed to him so unbelievable, and he realized now that he knew something about the peace marches that they didn't know. And yet, would he stand up? He's very brave, but would he stand up to the pressure from them if he started to say what the peace marches really are? You know how the peace marches ended. It was in March. They beat up Jewish young men from Hashomer HaTzair during a peace march. And so then there was some reaction in saying, well, you can't beat up Jews in a peace march, even though you can say that the Israelis are
The devil,
Nazis
yeah.
and the Americans are the same. And so they tried to eliminate the jihad element of the peace marches, and then there weren't enough people, so they had to stop.
You once described the anti-Americanism in France as being pernicious. Tell us why that's so.
It is so, you can just, it's like if you take 3 layers of transparency and you put the anti-Zionism, the anti-Semitism, the anti-Americanism, and it's interchangeable. It's obsessional. It's based on constant distortion. I mean, there are days where I listen to the radio. I always love to hear the news. I listen to the radio and watch the television. There are days when I'm tearing my hair out, shouting to the radio because of this obsessional anti-Americanism.
What are some of the things they say that are anti-American?
Well, I'll give you a funny, off, kind of peripheral example. One time, when they were starting to think of using Amber Alert in France, they described the origin of Amber Alert, and they said it came from Canada. And they said AMBER meant something, and they gave us what it meant.
Tell us, our viewers, what Amber Alert is.
Amber Alert is named after a girl named Amber,
Yes.
who was kidnapped and murdered. And so they developed a new system in the United States, and they find the kidnappers much more quickly by putting all the information out right away. I saw an Amber Alert on the highway. And so the French wouldn't even grant that it was the Americans who invented it, developed it, and are using it, and that it's improvement over their way. And now they are starting to use Amber Alert. And sometime after that, I did hear them say it. But okay, that's a funny example.
That might be characterized as sort of a national pride. But pernicious is very negative, isn't it?
Well, that's pernicious because it shows that they would go to that extent. You see, they will go to that extent to even deny us Amber Alert. All right. But then Iraq. They lie all the time about what's happening in Iraq, and they only show, I know it's controversial here too, but they only show the bad things. I'll give you an example.